Good morning. So everybody looks well rested from our extra hour of sleep last night. As you know, this is our 5th week of our series that we've been calling Good News. Today we're going to look at some good news when it comes to death. That in context, death is bad news, but there's also good news. We all ask ourselves that question at some point in our life: what happens after death? Which at one level can be kind of a strange question, because we've all been to funerals and we know exactly what happens. That after death, the deceased are buried or cremated. End of story, no mystery at all. Yet that answer seems so unsatisfactory, both for us and for the people we love that have gone before us. For death to have the final word just doesn't seem right or just. That every longing we experience holds the potential for fulfillment. We hunger for food, and there's food. We thirst, and there's water. We desire friendship and companionship, and there are people in our lives. But there's another longing in us that's even more powerful and lasts a whole life long. We long for something more, something beyond just this life. And the famous author C.S. Lewis wrote, "If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this life can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we've been made for another world." That's the good news that we're looking at today. This good news comes in a confrontation Jesus has with the Sadducees. The Sadducees were powerful political and religious leaders associated with the upper class. They controlled the temple and the Sanhedrin, the center of religious life in Jerusalem, and the tribunal, or the high court, which governed the legal issues of the city. So we can recall it was the Sanhedrin that condemned Jesus to death and handed him over to Pontius Pilate. So our story picks up with this episode just before Jesus' death on the cross, as the conflict between Jesus and the religious leaders of his day were heating up. Now, there are many different ideas that people may have about life after death. And some may believe in some form of reincarnation, or others, an underworld where the soul continues a life of its own, often including punishment, or a heavenly world where the soul is rewarded, or resurrection, which regards the body rising from the dead and being reunited with the soul. The Sadducees, though, rejected everything and anything after death. They thought you died and that was it, a vast nothingness. The law of Moses said that if a married man dies and doesn't leave a descendant, then his brother must marry his widow. It sounds a little bit odd, but it was actually to protect the rights of the woman, who otherwise might become destitute, and to ensure that the brother's line, his brother's legacy, would be established. So the Sadducees make up this ridiculous scenario. So now there were 7 brothers. The first married a woman but died childless. Then the second and the third married her. And likewise, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. Now at the resurrection, whose wife will that woman be? For all 7 had married her. Their argument, the Sadducees' argument, is that there cannot be a resurrection because, among other issues, it would introduce all kinds of legal problems in the next life. But Jesus handily answers their argument with good news. Jesus says there is no marriage in heaven. But that's not the good news, though. The legal issues around marriage won't apply to the next life. Jesus continues, they can no longer die, for they're like angels. They are the children of God because they are the ones who will rise. Jesus says in the next age we'll be like angels in the sense that we will live forever in a perfected version of ourselves. That the dead will rise, even Moses made known in the passage about the bush, when he called out, Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He's not God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. God is eternal life, and anyone connected to him is alive in him. Luke concludes, some of the scribes said in reply, Teacher, you have answered well, and they no longer dared to ask him anything. Now that, of course, doesn't prove that there is a resurrection. Just prove that Jesus was smarter and could out-argue the Sadducees. What proves the resurrection is the resurrection. On Good Friday, Jesus' body was bloodied and broken. 3 days later, he rose from the dead. His resurrection is the heart of the good news. More than that, Jesus promises because he rose that we will rise also. He is the first to rise from the dead, but not the last. We too will receive resurrected bodies like his. And more than that, through Jesus' resurrection, God wins redemption and launches renewal of all things. The good news at its heart is about the redemption and renewal of the whole of creation. God will eventually infuse creation with his promise and his presence. Jesus' resurrection launches this new creation, and he will complete it when he comes in glory at the end of time. That's the good news. And here's the rest of the news. How you envision your future influences and impacts your present and how you think, feel, handle stress and tension, fear, and doubt. So what if all that is true about the resurrection? It means that despite our day-to-day battles, the war is already won. We know that our future is secure. That means that we can live in joyful hope every single day in the face of every single challenge, every loss, grief, or even death itself. That truly is good news.